We're joined now by one of Mahmoud Khalil's lawyers, Diala Shamas. She is the senior staff attorney at the Center for Constitutional Rights and attended Khalil's hearing virtually today. Diala, thank you so much for joining Top Story tonight. We understand your client does intend to file an appeal. Walk us through the next steps for you and your client.
Thank you for having me. So today in court, it was very clear that our client is not going to get a fair hearing. Today was not a fair hearing. It was, in many ways, the epitome of lack of due process, as Mahmoud himself said in a beautiful statement at the end of the hearing, where he affirmed that he did not have due process. Clearly, what we witnessed, I read, clearly what we witnessed today, neither of these principles were present today or in this whole process. This is exactly why the Trump administration has sent me to this court 1,000 miles away from my family. I just hope that the urgency that you deemed fit for me are afforded to the hundreds of others who have been here without a hearing for months. The fight is not over. Mahmoud and the entire legal team will continue to fight this. Now, there are some next steps in the immigration court. There's some relief that's available to him. But we are also looking to federal court, where we believe we should be, the court should be hearing Mahmoud's constitutional claims. Remember that the reason Mahmoud was picked up, whisked away at night from his now 9 months pregnant wife, is because of his speech. It's because of his advocacy. And in the Department of State's own 2-page determination, as they confirm, it's because of his beliefs. It's his beliefs of support for Palestinian freedom, support for Palestinian rights, his protesting the Israeli genocide in Gaza, Israel's military assault in Gaza. There are serious constitutional questions that should trouble all of us. And what we saw today in immigration court was a judge that did not want to hear any of that. She simply rubber stamped this 2-page determination saying that she didn't need to look beyond it, that a simple pro forma determination by Secretary Rubio saying that Mahmoud Khalil's beliefs would compromise a compelling U.S. foreign policy interest is sufficient to find him removable.
Do you believe that you will be able to get this removed or moved to federal court in a short period of time? I mean, how long would that take? And in terms of what you said as well as your client, that you don't believe he is getting a fair hearing, do you believe he could get a fair hearing in a U.S. federal court?
That's what we're fighting for. So there are 2 parallel sets of proceedings here. We have been in federal court, and a New Jersey judge has already found that he does have jurisdiction to hear this case. And so we have several pending motions before the judge. Fundamentally, our goal is to get Mahmoud home to Noor before she gives birth later this month. And we're fighting really hard for that to happen. I mean, the irony here is that the immigration judge said that she is not going to hear any of these constitutional claims. She's not going to give him a full, due process rights, is not going to look beyond this 2-page determination. And then the government is telling the federal court that you can't go to federal court, that you have to be in immigration court. And so from all sides, essentially, what we're hearing is that the executive is going to go unchecked here, and that cannot be right. You cannot have an unchecked executive that simply says somebody's beliefs are a threat to U.S. foreign policy, and that makes them deportable. That makes us able to detain them in the middle of the night, whisk them away. Remember that Mahmoud is not alone. There are many others that have been now put in detention because of their beliefs. And so I think it is incredibly important that we are before the federal court soon to hear these constitutional challenges, not just to what happened to Mahmoud individually, but at the end of the day, it implicates what we have shown to be a policy of the Trump administration to arrest, detain, transfer non-citizens simply because of their advocacy for Palestinian rights.
Let me ask you a little broadly here about visas, because you mentioned that this idea that he's being deported on the belief that he is a threat. When you look at laws as it relates to visas, student visas, revoking those in particular, the revocation of those visas are governed by an incredibly broad framework. Your client, as I understand, had a green card that's not a student visa, and green card rules, they are typically a little more specific, but they still do grant a lot of discretion to the U.S. government. I mean, one of the possibilities of revocation is simply being a security threat to the United States. Is there a specific legal definition of what constitutes a security threat? Or is this a situation where the government can essentially say, that is to us and it's enough? It seems like legally the court would favor the U.S. government when it comes to revoking visas. Is that a fair read of the U.S. law?
Well, a couple of things. To be clear, the government has even said that Mahmoud Khalil implicates any security threat. Let's be clear. In their determination, they simply say that his beliefs compromise a compelling U.S. foreign policy interest. That is a far cry from any allegation around security, and there's nothing in the allegations against him that raise any kind of security threat. This is not a national security matter. This is simply about someone's political beliefs and wanting to exclude people for their beliefs.
When is
With that said,
yeah, sorry, go ahead. I was going to just.
With that said, you're right that the government has started its what is ultimately a broader push to repress disfavored beliefs, starting with those in support of Palestinian rights, has started this assault in the immigration system because it can assert more authorities. It has, of course, some more discretion over visas and that sort of thing. Regardless of that discretion, non-citizens still have constitutional rights to free speech, to free association. The First Amendment is not limited to citizens. It includes non-citizens.
When is the last time you've been able to speak directly with Mahmoud? How is he doing?
We were able to speak with him after the hearing to debrief how that went. Listen, of course it was devastating, but I have to say that the poise, the dignity, the care with which he has continued to carry himself throughout this ordeal, including his statement in court today that signaled not only this dignified approach, but this care for others that has really come something that as I've come to know him, I've only met him since he was put in detention, but it's clearly something that comes across so strongly. To me, that all comes from the knowledge that he is on the right side of history, that at the end of the day, he knows that he is standing on the right side of history, that those that are standing with him are on the right side of history. And ultimately, what we're seeing is a Trump administration that is trying to silence, and I'm not going to say a minority because this is actually a majority, Mahmoud Khalil, in participating in campus protests advocating for an end to U.S. support for Israel's military assault on Gaza is actually a very widely held belief. Citizens and non-citizens alike have held that belief, have shared it, have taken to the streets to articulate it. And all of those people are on the right side of history. Mahmoud knows that. So this is an ordeal that he's going through. But the Trump administration's effort to make a lesson of him, to use his case as a blueprint to erode all of our rights, is only going to backfire. Right. And we all draw strength and courage from watching how Mahmoud has carried himself over the course of the last month, over a month that he's been behind bars.
Diala Shamas, we have to leave it there tonight. Thank you so much. We appreciate you taking the time to speak with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.